Good day, everyone. Welcome to week 7 and developing a personal philosophy. We want to, now that we've gone through looking at sort of design processes, now's the time for you to really start to think about how you align individually as a designer or planner. And going back to Rob's quadruple bottom line, the idea of economics, ecological, social, and then his sort of quadruple, the aesthetics. So this is just a kind of a quickie overview today to talk a little bit about, so where does inspiration come from? This week, my lecture won't really be a lecture, it's just this quickie. There's a series of videos that I want you guys to take a look at. And one of the things that's really interesting with these is this idea of where does inspiration come from, and how do you as a designer start to frame your approach and your methodology. So those are some of the things that I want you to be thinking about. There's 5 to 6 different TED Talks. And the thing that's interesting about TED Talks is, for instance, this is William McDonough. He is the founder of the Cradle to Cradle philosophy. And so I would suggest you start with his, because one of the things that's really interesting is, one, he has coined a term around which is his personal philosophy. And one of the things that I want you guys to do is to do the same thing. So for the assignment this week, we're going to be using branding as an approach to developing a personal philosophy. The thing that's great about branding is it forces you to articulate in a very succinct fashion what you strive for as a designer or as a planner. And branding also really forces you to think about how you're communicating those ideas. I don't really think at the college we spend much time helping students articulate in a very succinct fashion their philosophy and their approach. We seem to just go from project to project. We do a very detailed portfolio, but we never really think about how does that engage people on the emotional side. And a lot of a community-engaged design is about design. It's about emotion and communicating and connecting with people. So take a look at this, Roberts, and it's a pretty interesting one. It also, I think what's great is when we talk about a brand and how he presents himself as an architect, cradle to cradle, that's his mantra, that's his caption, his title, how he coins what it is he tries to do. Here are his 5 design tenets that he thinks about. So each of you, as you're developing your design tenets, I'm not expecting you to solve the world, but to really kind of focus in on those aspects of it that are the most important for you. Other people, in terms of where inspiration comes from, Tony Griffin, I think you will enjoy her talk. She is an architect / planner and really has been instrumental in what they're trying to move forward with in Detroit. And I think for those landscape architects in the group, she talks a little bit about, while urban agriculture is great, it's not everything. And what are the other things we need? Robert Neuwirth is really great talking about innovation and different ways of thinking about how we redevelop cities. These 2 artists are hilarious in terms of the idea of art and creative placemaking. Majora Carter as an activist in the Bronx and really looking at a green approach, but how her green approaches, which is where she originally started, are now moving into social and economic approaches. And then we got Dan Phillips from Texas doing crazy shit, building crazy places out of repurposed materials. So these groups were really meant to be an opportunity for you guys to see examples of individuals who have some sort of level of inspiration as we kind of move forward. So here we are with our little famous, see how big, can I make myself that big? No, I don't want to. I'm not that good looking anyway, so I'll stay right there. This is about sort of where we are. We have finished up and you've done your test for our module 2 and looking in the weeds and using that. Don't forget the idea of where cities came from. You might have some source of inspiration from there. So don't forget as you're moving forward to keep that one in mind. So developing a personal philosophy between now and spring break, the next 3 weeks, this is the module that we're focusing on. And we're going to take a look and just go over that real quick. This week, week 7, what does it mean to develop tenets, personal tenets? Next week will be, I'll be introducing the midterm introduction. I'll actually try to get it out a little bit sooner than that. I am going to be setting up personal meetings next week with each of you. So we'll do some online personal conversations. I'll set out a doodle poll this week to get that going. And then I'd like to be able to go over both the quiz, your presentation of your tenets so far, so we can really hash those out for week 9, which will be 3-minute presentations that you'll be doing. And we'll talk more about that next week. So for the moment, let's get into tenets and really what we're sort of talking about there. Tenets are sort of this idea of overarching philosophies that can apply to all community engaged design. You're going to be pulling, as I mentioned, from obviously weeks 4 to 6, creating tenets. As I mentioned, we're going to be using a marketing strategy for this. I think it's just a great way to start to do that. There is a 1-page document that talks about the 7 tenets of brand design. And so as we look at that, really, brand happens. We can look at greenwashing as an example of a brand strategy that has been very effective, and in some places perhaps too effective and with no teeth behind it in terms of what they're really talking about. But it is really a blend of tangible and intangible qualities, and that's what makes it so interesting. A promise of an experience that connects with the user's emotions. And so I think that's what's really interesting with this, is that as you are developing your philosophy, you are thinking about an experience, how people will experience your building, your designs, and how does that experience connect with their emotions. And that's an important aspect of what we do with community design. And so I added this little one, the idea of connecting with the heart and the mind. So each tenet will have a level 1, which is a motto. So for instance, McDonough, cradle to cradle, everyone has a different one. So you're going to really try to think about what might be your motto that you stand behind in terms of your perspective and your personal philosophy. Level 2 is a sentence that just further illustrates or describes what that motto means. And yes, you're going to try to keep it to 1 sentence, if at all possible. And then there is level 3, which might be sort of talking about the outcomes that are expected. And I have a phone that's going crazy here. So just put that over there. Sorry about that. So that's really what the exercise will be that we're working on this week. Here is a list of those different TED Talks. And again, why I like TED Talks, they are, they're short on content, but they're great on inspiration. And that's what we're talking about. Cradle to Cradle, we've talked about that one. Green-minded architect and designer William McDonough asked what our buildings and products would look like if designers took into account all children, all species, for all time. So one could say his motto is not only cradle to cradle, but all children, all species, for all time. Next one here, we talked about this one, really looking at Tony and looking at how we can reimagine Detroit and its future for 700,000 residents. Keep in mind, this one from Tony is 2016. A lot of the things that she is talking about have been implemented. Cradle to Cradle is one of his first talks. So his whole movement has really grown and developed, so feel free to take a look at that. This one is interesting. This is a technologist And so Dave Troy looks at the use of text messages as a way to understand neighborhoods, cliques, and clubs, and hidden lines that join and divide people in the same town. Really interesting when one starts to look at how you look at the tweets of people as a way to understand community. This is a 2014 one, and I think it really starts to force us to understand how do we use new technologies to better understand communities and places. The gang are artists. They have not only been in Rio, but have done things in North Philadelphia. You'll see some of their work when we move into North Philly. Again, I think what I like about this talk is we've kind of got our own creative placemaking, but they talk about some of the faux pas that they did, not really understanding the community when they first started doing these. So I think you'll like them. These are only 12-minute. You don't have to watch all of them, but there's 5 that I think would be really important for you to do. Again, we got Dan Phillips, and just sort of wildly creative ways to use recycled and reclaimed material. And then lastly, Robert Neuwirth, and this idea what he calls, so his motto is System D, and it's talking about the world's unlicensed economic network, which is responsible for 1.8 billion jobs. So we have to stop not thinking about this. We have to really rethink different ways that we can survive in communities. So anyway, there it is. I look forward to looking over your quizzes. That's my homework for this week is doing that. And I'll be sending out doodles that will be there for you to pick a time next week where we can have an individual Zoom conversation. Thanks, everybody. And that's it for week 7.